All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AXUG webinar. This is the second in the series of webinars this year on keeping up with the continuous release cycle, and this is quarter two. Our presenter for all of these sessions is Nathan Klaus, an expert from Dynamic Consulting. I want to welcome Nathan, and as always, thank him for sharing his expertise with the community. Before I turn the presentation over to Nathan, I want to talk just a little bit about what's coming up in dynamic communities. First off, we are always looking for volunteers, whether your passion is to present in a webinar format like this, or present in a more academic format via the AXUG Academy, or to serve and write content. Please go to the user group homepage and sign up to volunteer your time. If you do that, I get an email, and I'll be sure to get in touch with each and every one of you. And we are currently promoting cybersecurity tapas, or series of small events through dynamic communities for all the user groups. It's a free event, so if you're interested in joining it, please go to the user group homepage and look at the options for attending those. And Community Summit 2020 in Nashville, Tennessee in October is still on the books. We're planning to be on site, and we would love to have you there with us, planning nearly 100 AXUG F&O sessions. So please go out to the website and consider joining us there as well. And just a few housekeeping items. You're all on mute for best sound quality. If you have a question during Nathan's presentation, type it in the question box. We'll save up the questions and we'll have a Q&A at the end. And because you registered for the event, if you are a member of AXUG, you'll receive an email that contains a link to both the PowerPoint presentation and a recording of this webinar. So with that, I'm going to change presenter rights to Nathan. Nathan, I'll let you know when I can see your screen, and then I'll start the recording. All right, you're good to begin.
All right, can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, great. So hello, my name is Nathan Klaus. We'll be covering all of the new releases in Q2 of this year for Dynamics Finance and Supply Chain. Just one moment, having some technical difficulties here. Okay, I guess my pointer's not going to work. My name is Nathan Klaus. I'm a technical solution architect with Dynamic Consulting. I have a blog where I talk about various things related to, it used to be called AX, now it's Finance and Supply Chain. But I focus on technical stuff. But if you like to check out my blog, feel free. I'm also available on Twitter if you have any questions or just want to know how stuff works. You can always contact me there if you don't want to email me. And there's my LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. So what we'll be covering today is what's new in each minor version that came out this quarter. So it's 10.0.10 and 10.0.11. We have 36 new features in 10.0.10 and 37 in .11. And we're going to group those into sort of three groups. Globalization, which we won't talk much about. If you operate in any of those countries, they'll be tagged with a country code. I encourage you to go look at the Microsoft docs for those. Those are documented very well. The next group will be what I call simple. There's not much to show or explain. The name of the feature explains exactly what it does. And then we'll just dive into the more complex features in just the features section. All right, so what's new in 10.0.10? So what you'll see through our next slides here is there's a lot of functionality, and this really specifically was focused at providing some new functionality to Italy. So I'll just leave these here so you can read through these if you'd like. A lot of these, again, you'll see Italy is mentioned quite a few times in here. There's been a lot of feedback from the community for a lot of these Italian localizations to be just included as global, as part of the global product, not specific to a specific locale or country. So we may in later versions see some of this stuff, especially from the Italy localizations, become part of just the product as it stands and not be specific to Italy. So next we're going to jump into our simple features for 10.0.10. The first is, there's a feature called multiple product receipt postings per load. This will let you keep a load open and allow the inbound load receiving process and allow multiple receipt postings for the same load as long as you'd like, so you can continue to receive stuff in, let's say throughout the day. And this allows for quantities to be registered and product receipt updated on the ledger on an ongoing basis. So if you get inventory sort of trickling in per load, you can have multiple receipt postings. The next is to use existing catch weight tags when reporting production order is finished. So this adds support for reporting as finished production orders via the warehousing app when you have catch weight tags registered in advance to a production order. This is enabled on the mobile device menu for that operation, and there is a new checkbox that says generate catch weight tag that has to be disabled for that menu item. The next new feature is a new button. So this is the name of the feature. A new button to stop break has been added to the job card terminal page. So on screen right here, I've enabled this feature, configured the screen, and added it. So you can see right there, we now have a stop break button. After you enable this feature, you actually have to go in and configure the screen to add the button. Turning the feature on just enables you to use the button, but it doesn't add to your screen, so that's a second step to get this to work. Next is add vendor ID and vendor name to posted projects list page. So you can see here on screen, I'm on my project transactions list page. If I scroll all the way to the right, you can see I now have my vendor account and vendor name columns there. So if I had any transactions in here related to a vendor, I could see that right here in this list page. Next is allow interest distribution and escheatment features to create bank transactions. So this is public sector only, and allows for interest distribution and in general escheatment features when you create bank transactions when they're associated with an advanced ledger entry. And if you're not public sector, you may not know what any of these words mean. But to use this, you have to update bank balances when posting an advanced ledger entry. Update bank balances when posting advanced ledger entries. That feature must be enabled. So there's another feature related to this that has to be enabled with this feature in order for it to work. Next is allow unmatching of freight bills from freight invoice lines without a posted vendor invoice journal. So if you're unfamiliar with the freight bills, you can now match those to vendor invoices, and you can now do that on a line-by-line basis. So if you have some freight bills or freight bill lines associated to vendor invoice journals or vendor invoice journal lines that are matched but not posted, you can go ahead and unmatch those, and that will delete the unposted journals related to that freight bill match. Next is the a feature called email distributor batch job email expiration. So what this does is when you turn this feature on, you get a new parameter in your email parameter screen called email expiration in days. If you set this to any number above 0, that's the number of days that it will try to send an email and fail. And after a certain number of days, if it can't send that email, it will just stop attempting to send that email. And this is related to the system email table. So if you have other systems that are sending emails through other means, this does not apply to those. Next is email receipts from the journal. So this is a retail or commerce specific feature. But when you're on a POS, when you're looking at receipts for posted transactions, those can now be emailed to the customer when looking at the journal for that transaction. There'll be a new email icon displayed, which once you hit it, we'll just go ahead and send the email with that receipt to the customer's email that they have on file right from POS. Next is enable default accounting setup for project. When you enable this feature, you get a new button when you're looking at your list of all projects that says show default accounting. And when you click on that, you just sort of get a little list pane of some, handy to have information for the project you have currently selected. Next, we have enable filter auto charges by channel. This is retail and commerce specific. And this will only work once you have to enable the feature, and then it'll only work if you use advanced automatic charges inside commerce. But assuming both of those are on, when you go to your delivery auto charges, you'll see two new fields there for the retail channel code, which will allow you to set up charge groups by retail channel or by store. And then, you've got your relation for that group. So sort of a cool feature for retail. Next is just a performance feature. So it enables the inquiry form for posted sales transactions. So when you go to tax, inquiries and reports, sales tax inquiries, before it was just a list page with everything. Now you get this inquiry so you can narrow down what it is you're looking for. So if you are looking for sales tax posted on a specific date or by sales tax code or by voucher, you can go ahead and paste this in. This was put in for two major reasons. First, just to make it easier to find stuff so you don't have to wait for a list page to load. And secondarily, performance reasons. We're fetching a lot of data that we may not potentially need. So, we're going to add a query to reduce the amount of data that the system is fetching each time we bring up this form. Next is enhanced license plate label layouts. So in a past version, they added document routing layouts. This just surfaces some of that information as it relates to LPs or license plates from the layouts that you set up in document routing. So any labels that are printed or generated through document routing will now show up in this screen right here, which is called license plate labels. So you can see any of your LPs that have been printed with document routing layouts. Next is a feature called Extended Warranty feature. This now lets us add a product service type. So if you see there on the screen, I'm making a new release product of type service, and I have a service type of not specified and warranty. There's very little functionality behind this in the current state, but sort of a cool feature that now, we're going to see inroads into having service types of, a warranty, maybe a license, maybe any, virtual goods you might sell with a physical good. We'll be able to now manage those a little bit differently, and there'll be some additional functionality behind that. Once you have a new item that has a warranty subtype, you get the warranty tab. I'm sorry, the warranty fast tab, and there's a few fields in there you can fill out for that item. This is in general not feature complete, but we're seeing some cool new features here. Next is organization-wide work blocking. So this is what our work screen looks like when we have this feature off. You can see here we have the block or unblock work button highlighted. What this feature does is basically explode that out. So then we can block work or unblock work as two different operations, and we can also now create a split session and cancel that split once we have this feature enabled. So if we go back just for a second, we're not really adding features, we're changing the way that some of the features are consumed and just overall improving the UI. So we have a button for an action rather than one button that can do a couple different things. Next is quality management for warehouse processes. So this just adds in a lot of new functionality related to quality management when you're using WMS. So this is what your quality association screen looks like with the feature off. This is what it's looked like for the past several versions. But now with the feature on, we now have the ability to change the warehouse type for this quality association. And our options here are for all, which is the default. So this will apply to all warehouses. Or the other option is quality management for warehouse processes only. So this would limit this quality association to your WMS-enabled warehouses only. Similar with our item sampling. So again, this is what the screen looks like with the feature off. With the feature on, you have two new options. You have sampling scope. And your options here for your sample are the order, the shipment, or the load. And also an option to do this every, they call it per nth license plate, but every X license plate. So if that number were 10, we'd be doing a sampling every 10 license plates. And it's entirely configurable. 0 means do no sampling. Next is the vendor invoice batch posting. So this is sort of a cool feature. So this lets you add an automated posting task to a vendor invoice workflow. So the invoice is posted using batch, and posted invoice in batch lets the workflow process continue without having end users wait for the posting to occur, and that improves overall system performance because one, you don't have to wait for the system to do a thing while you're just sort of sitting and looking at the screen or just waiting. And in general, you can see here we've got some options here. So we can configure, how many are posted in batch. So, throughout the day, it'll process 5 every 10 minutes or something like that, rather than do one giant batch job at the end of the day, which may fail or error out in some way. Next is wave parallelization for the Allocate Wave method. So this one's a little bit technical. But this feature lets you, or gives you the option of running the Allocate Wave method for wave templates in parallel to improve the overall processing performance. When you enable this, the parallel processing will be activated and task configurations will be created for all warehouses for all legal entities that use the warehouse, or that are using warehouse management processes. So each configuration for each warehouse and each legal entity has a setting that lets you define the number of tasks that will run simultaneously. So that was a really techie way of saying current state is it's single threaded, so all legal entities are, everyone's going through sort of one pipeline. This is now opening it up so every warehouse and every legal entity has a pipeline to allocate waves. So sort of cool. So if you're a warehouse heavy organization, you'll definitely want to check this out. This is similar to MRP with bundles and tasks and getting some multi-threading there. So very similar to that concept. Next, we're going to cover 10.0.11. Again, we have some globalization. This is less focused on Italy, and there actually wasn't much globalization here. In this release, we only have 4 items. But again, if you operate in those countries, please do check those out. Next, the feature is it's called Calculate Origin Amount for Sales Tax Specification by Ledger Transaction Report. So this is just a new reporting feature. So it enables calculation of the origin amount in the sales tax specification by ledger transaction report when the report is grouped by sales tax code and the total parameter on the report is set to yes. So just more reporting options. Next is enable enable manual void of expired credit card payment lines when authorizations are expired. So what this does is when it's enabled, a user can void a specific line on an order rather than having to go through the credit card payments workbench, which was a bit cumbersome. So if you have an expiration, if you have an expired auth on a credit card, you can just go ahead and void that authorization for that line. Next is enable to enter batch and serial number while reporting is finished from the job card device screen. This is currently in preview. So although the name says you can enter batch and serial numbers, currently only batch numbers are supported. But again, it's in preview. It's not feature complete. So by the time this is fully released, we should have support for batch numbers and serial numbers. Next is enhancement of commerce asynchronous quotations and orders. I lumped this into simple because it could be a whole hour-long discussion as to what this all means. But when you've enabled this feature, you can push more data out to your stores so your stores can do quotations and orders right from there, and then they will, as the stores have availability, they'll sync up with the back office. Next is evaluate policy against borrowing legal entity. So this is for expense management. This lets a worker create and submit expenses in his or her legal entity for work that is performed for a different legal entity. Essentially, this is just intercompany expenses. Extended warranty for customer order. So related to the last, what was released in 10.0.10 with the product subtype of warranty. This has now been pushed out to enable warranties for customer orders, which is a commerce and retail specific function. Next is the add lines to PO invoices associated with purchase agreements. So this is a public sector feature and lets you add lines to a generated purchase order invoice prior to posting. And this can be useful for adding a service item to an invoice that was generated for a purchase order that is associated with a purchase agreement. Next is generate the sales tax payment by code report in the sales tax code currency. So the name of the feature tells you exactly what it does, and it does nothing more. Next, we have improve the performance of purchase update history cleanup for vendor invoices. This feature speeds up the purchase history cleanup process. Improves overall performance and helps save time. So what this did in older versions is it would clean up everything all as one sort of big job. And if you have a lot of data to clean up, it would mean in the meantime no purchase order postings could take place. This now breaks it up into smaller chunks. So if you have, let's say, 10 billion records that it needs to get through, it processes them in much smaller chunks so that overall operations for purchasing and purchase orders are not affected by the cleanup. The next feature is ISO 222. And this includes processed payment, the processed payment count to the payments end-to-end ID for the ISO 222 credit transfer bank documents if you are using advanced bank reconciliation only. So if you don't know what any of that means, that's okay. It probably doesn't apply to you. The next feature is line reservation enhancements for the batch number reservation form. So what this does is, old state was that you could reserve a line at a time. This enhances it so you can reserve multiple lines at a time. Next is for the moving average costing methodology. So moving average fallback cost sequence. This feature enables the ability to select between 3 predefined fallback cost sequences for moving average. And the specific scenario this was designed to address is where inventory goes negative and a cost has to be assigned. The next is performance enhancements for free text invoice to avoid tax recalculation. So current state, each time you interact or make any changes to a free text invoice, it recalculates tax. With this feature on, it'll calculate it when it's needed. So it'll calculate it on create or update or processing. But there's some steps in between where, with this feature off, it's recalculating tax unnecessarily. So this is just a quality of life performance enhancement tweak. The next feature is prevent reusing containers from different container build templates during containerization. When you generate containers from one build template, they cannot be used on a different build template during containerization. The next feature is query enhancement for coproduct and byproduct put away work template. So this lets you use data from coproducts and byproducts in addition to main product data in the coproduct and byproduct put away work template query. So when you enable this, it doesn't really actually do anything. It just enables the use of this new query. So if you enable this and you have all of your work templates assigned and you don't make any changes to them, it had no appreciable effect. But enabling this feature allows you to use that new query, which has extended functionality around coproduct and byproduct put away. Next is remove dependency on real-time services for retail return. This is a commerce-specific thing, but it improves the overall performance of cash and carry and sales order customer orders by removing dependency on real-time services. So all this really does is push down some additional info to your stores so they can operate on their own if they're not able to check in or have a connection back to the back office. Next is remove the option to replace existing budget plans. So this is a public sector feature. So enabling this feature, it shows a parameter on the budget planning configuration page that will hide the replace the existing budget plan scenario option for all users when enabled. Lastly, we have the set project sales price for project purchase requisition from purchase price. So basically what this feature does is current state, when you have a project sale price with a project requisition, it will use the sale price from the item that is on that purchase requisition. If you enable this feature, it'll use the purchase price from that item as the sales price on the project. Next, we have, this is a preview feature, designate fields as required using personalization. So you can see here on my screen, I'm trying to make a new vendor. You can see I've got a few fields as marked as required. I need to have a vendor account, a name, and a group. However, if I go ahead and try and personalize this screen, I just picked one field at random. I made DUNS number required, so I have to put that in. Now, when I go back to and I'm out of my personalization view, you can see I have to enter a vendor account, a name group, and a DUNS number. However, since this is still in preview, I went ahead and just typed in my 3 required fields that I knew about and ignored the 4th one that I added, and it allowed me to save the record. So, cool feature. I'm not sure if this is intended functionality or not, but again, it's in preview, so we may see some changes come to this. But regardless, I made this field look, I marked it as required, and it looks required. So I'll at least get that warning that, hey, this is probably something I want to fill in, even if it's not forcing me to fill it in. The next feature is advanced ledger settlement and reverse settlement changes. So this is a public sector feature. If you're using advanced ledger settlement, you can settle and unsettle records as sort of as 2 different processes. So you can mark some records for settle, some for unsettle, and you'll have a button to process each set of different records for your different scenarios. So current state is you can do one or the other. Now we can do both at the same time. Next is capture consent for marketing on email and phone numbers. So with this feature on, you get a new option when looking at contact info called marketing opt-in. It defaults to no, but if you want to keep track of that in finance and supply chain, you can enable this feature, and then it's there on every contact info record. Next is control whether to display a receiving summary page on mobile devices. So when you enable this feature, you get a new parameter on menu items for the warehousing app that are LP receive LP related. So I think there's only 2 menu item types for that, but this is an example of one. You can see here I can display a detailed summary, or I can skip the summary when doing LP receipt. This is a commerce feature, so customer service order search. So inside commerce, if you go into the customer service screen, you will now have a new tab called order search, and that lets you do all sorts of searching for orders that is more a customer service focused experience. Next is improved performance of general ledger reports. Rather than include a bunch of screenshots, I just listed out everything that's changing. In general, they've just added date ranges to a lot of reports and list pages and stuff like that. So if you've been using, formerly AX or 365 for a while, excuse me, when you ask for something, you may not necessarily have a date filter to apply, or it's optional, so you can pull back a lot of data and you may be only interested in a few days. This is now adding date ranges to some reports, so you have to specify, I only want to look at fiscal year 2020, or I only want to look at 2019, whatever the case is. And it's been added to these reports. So transaction list, account statement, dimension statement, transaction origin, and a few other list pages here and there. But the required dates will just reduce the amount of data the system has to go get to display, which will help prevent overall system degradation in general. And along those lines, we have a new feature called Infant On-Hand Report Storage. So this is sort of a unique feature. So when you go to your Infant On-Hand Report Storage form, you can create a new record. I guess let me step back for a second. From here, you can run the inventory on-hand report, but it runs entirely in batch. You don't necessarily see that it's running. You just specify the parameters, and when it's done, it will show up in this list. So it's sort of unique, but here I made an example. I want to view on hand as of right now for just site and warehouse. So I went to new. I filled out my query options. Went and did other stuff. Came back, and when I clicked on view details, so here's my on hand as of whenever that report ran for the dimensions that I selected. When you make a new record, this is the screen you'll get. So you can go to all of your on-hand, fill out all of your filters, and run it just like you would the normal on-hand inventory report. But when you click OK, rather than get the report or even a record that you're asking for this data, you'll get just this little message along the top that says the on-hand job inventory added is on-hand inventory job is added to the batch queue, and it'll sit and run. And then once the batch job is finished, then it'll show up in this page for you to view the details on. Otherwise, it's just running and there's nothing really to display. So a little bit of a unique experience, but if you want to capture inventory and not want to not have to wait for the report, or just want to keep your inventory, like at month end or whatever, available here, you can go ahead and do that. Next is license plate label build configuration. So this introduces a new configuration form with fields that have to be populated on new license plates. So this will let you select stuff that you want to skip. So it's a little bit different than what we would normally see, but this will allow large-scale businesses to improve performance by skipping over stuff that they don't want on their LPs or not required for their specific WMS processes. Next, we have lock financial dimensions on invoice lines on vendor prepayment invoice. So when you enable this feature, all it does is on the financial dimensions for lines for prepayment invoices, those financial dimensions are now locked. So you can see on screen I've got this feature enabled. I'm looking at a prepayment journal. Prepayment invoice, and I cannot make any changes to my financial dimensions at the line level. I can still make changes at the header level, but not at the line level. The next feature is over receipt of load quantities. So when you enable this feature, it adds in or exposes the over delivery and under delivery fields on your loads. Just as sort of a word of caution, this will default from items for new loads, but if you enable this feature and have a bunch of loads out there, they will not go through that initialization during load creation. So you'll have a few loads that will allow 0 under and 0 over delivery. They have to be exact. So like in this instance, I think I've got a quantity of 35 pieces. With this feature on, this load can only accept 35 pieces for this particular line. It cannot accept 34 or 36. It has to be dead on 35. So when you enable this, just as an advisory item, you're going to have to go through your open loads and specify your under and over delivery you want to allow if you're not expecting exact numbers. Next, we have Power Automate options. Our Power Automate options action menu items. So this just adds a new node or a new section to the options menu to integrate records on the current screen with Power Automate. So if you're wanting to be alerted of when a new sales order gets created or a new customer gets created or whatever the case is, now you've got your Power Automate buttons right from here. So you can go ahead and click Create Flow, and it'll take you over to Power Automate, and you can go ahead and create that flow. It also includes a shortcut to see what flows you currently have configured. Next, we have sort of a lengthy title for this one. It's prevent transfer order shipping license plates from being used on other warehouses than the destination warehouse. So what this does is it can help prevent physical on-hand updates of license plates different from the transfer order destination. This is useful when not using license plate tracking in transit warehouses, and your options are to either prevent reuse or allow reuse. Next feature is prompt to resolve ambiguous location/LP names. So what this does is when a warehouse worker will specify whether the value entered is a location or an LP when using the warehouse mobile device app. If there's any ambiguity, so if you have a location called 123 and an LP called 123, and you enter that for location/LP, they'll be prompted, is this a location or is this an LP? Because I've got both that match. And this functionality is available on movement by template, adjust out, inventory status change, warehouse transfer, and register material consumption work item types. Next feature is regenerate product variant names based on nomenclature. So when you enable this feature, you'll get 2 new fields on your product master. One's called use name nomenclature, and then you provide the variant name nomenclature, and that's what's available there is based on how you have your your product dimensions set up. So in this instance, I went with color and size. And then when I go back to my list view, under the setup section, I have a new button called generate variant names. And when if I were to click on that, it would regenerate some names for this product. So this is what it looks like before. So you can see here, this looks just like older versions of the product when we're using product variants. However, I now have some functionality to control how my product name and search name are generated for that. So rather than just get the same product name and search name over with different configurations, I now have different name and search name options, and that's configurable based on how you set up your nomenclature. I think our last feature today is vendor payment proposal automation. So this will let you automate the payment proposal process. You would define criteria for how this process would run, and then it'll generate a payment proposal automatically if you would like it to do so. Some of the examples are, let's say you pay your domestic vendors by EFT every Monday, or vendors by check every Wednesday. You can configure some of these rules so it'll generate a payment proposal based on those rules. And where this functionality shows up, it's a little bit hidden. It took me a while to find. When you're generating a vendor payment proposal, there's a new fast tab called Advanced Parameters, where you'd set this stuff up and hit OK. And then based on how you configure it here, there's a batch job that's running that would create those vendor payment proposals based on how you can define your advanced parameters. So that is everything that's new in 10.0.10 and 10.0.11. So I'll open it up for if there are any questions, comments, concerns.
Great presentation, Nathan. We do not have any questions in the queue. So folks, if you have a question, take a few minutes and enter it now. And if not, Nathan has shared his contact information. So you can always contact him at a later date or at your convenience, both by email or on Twitter. So I am not seeing anything in the queue, Nathan. So with that, one question, when are these available? Do you know what she means by these?
Well, in general, 10.0.10 was available 2 months ago. I'm sorry, 1 month ago. 10.0.11 just went GA, I think, on the 28th of last month. So the .11 features are all brand new. But in general, we have new features sort of the first 2 months of every quarter, I'm sorry, the first month of every quarter, the middle month is off, and the second or the third month of every quarter, we get something new. So,
All right, you said perfect. Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to thank you all for attending today, and I'm going to close the webinar. Thanks,
all right, thank you.
Nathan.